Let's take an example. Consider two functions. F is negative 2x plus 3, z is x square. And domain of this function is all the real numbers, and the range is also all the real numbers. This function, it has domain to be all the real numbers. However, the range is 0 to infinity. Okay. F of g of x can be written as f of g of x. So g of x, that function would be the value for x, f. Okay. So this would be f of x square. Gx is x square, so I plugged in x square in here. Now let me plug in this x square here. So that will give me negative 2x square plus 3. That's the general composition of the function. Here, what is the domain of this function? It's of course the entire real number, negative infinity to positive infinity, real numbers, and the range would be, you can see that this is a quadratic curve, and if you draw this in GeoGebra, then you can clearly see that it opens downward and the highest point would be 3. Okay, so negative infinity to 3 would be our. So now to find the domain, I would just ask you to go for drawing the curve in one of the web application or in calculator, and you can see how does this look like. Okay. Now we are done with f of g. Let's go for g of f equals g of f of x would be g of f of x. fx, this function fx will be considered as a value for z. So that would be g of f of x is negative 2x plus 3 whole square. So this would be g of negative 2x plus 3. And let me plug in this value in here. So that becomes negative 2x plus 3 whole square. So that is negative 2x plus 3 whole square. If you expand this, then using the squares formula, perfect square formula, so this would be 4x square, and there is minus, so I can write minus 3 to 6 times 2 is 12x plus 9. So that would be our function. So this is also a quadratic function which opens up, okay, and from the point 9. Okay, so that means the domain would be entire real numbers for quadratic equation, for quadratic function, and range would be, since it opens upward from the point 9, so that would be 9 up to infinity would be the range. Okay, let's take another example. This time we have reciprocal function as x, f, and a square root function is z, right? Now, what is the domain and range of this function? The domain is simply all the real numbers except 0, and the range is also all the real numbers except 0. You try to remember how does this reciprocal function looks like. Okay, here for g of x, the domain is simply, okay, the domain for this one is simply x is greater than or equals to negative 3, or you can write in this way, negative 3 to infinity. Since you know what happens underneath the square root, and we always assume our functions to be real valued functions, and the range would be y is always greater than or equals to 0. Okay, so that would be the case. 0 to infinity would be our range. So that's all. Now let us find f of g, this composition. So let us find f of g of x. Then we can write in this way, f of g of x. G of x is treated as a value by function f. So this would be f of g of x would be root under x plus 3. Finally, let me plug in this value inside here. Okay, so that becomes 1 over underneath root x plus 3. So 1 over root under x plus 3 is our function that we got from the composition of two functions f of g. Okay, then what is the domain? Domain of this function is, of course, this quantity should not be 0, right? And also x plus 3 should be greater than 0. So that means x is greater than negative 3. right? So that would be our domain. Okay, so otherwise I can write in this way, -3 to infinity would be our domain. Range would be something just like, now if you don't know how to find domain and range, then just plot this in GeoGebra or Desmos, then you'll see that it would be something just like this. Okay, so this is -3, and there will be a straight line, but this curve y equals to 1 over root under x plus 3 won't meet this curve at this line at x equals to -3. So our range would be 0 towards infinity.